Hi everyone, good afternoon. Welcome to another library lunch hour. My name is Saba and I am the Special Projects Assistant here at Centro and the host for today's event. Today's event will have our library manager, Aníbal, who will be joined by baseball writer Raul Ramos to discuss Raul's book, Francisco Coímbre, Los Pates Grandes se respetan. Raul has worked extensively with our library and archives resources in his research and expertise, so we're very excited for him to share those experiences with us today. Additionally, we want to know what you would like to see in our upcoming library lunch hours, so we'll be dropping a link into our chat for a form to get your feedback towards the end of the event. So a little bit about Raul. He was born in Ponce, Puerto Rico, but has Cuban roots and discovered his love for baseball thanks to his father, and had the privilege of being coached in the little leagues of the Ponce Leones. He began his career in photojournalism in 1996 as an official photographer for the Ponce Leones baseball team during the 1997 to 1999 seasons, and graduated from the Inter-American University of Puerto Rico in 1999. And then in 2000, he moved into the state of New Jersey, where he continued to work with sports photojournalism in his spare time. And he is also the writer for the Spanish baseball website llenas.com, which means with the bases loaded. And in January of 2019, published the biography of Francisco Pancho Coímbre, Los Pates Grandes se respetan, and currently is the president of the foundation for that same baseball player. So today we'll begin that discussion. Without further ado, I'll hand it off to Aníbal so we can get started. Thank you.
Hi, thank you, Saba, and thank you to everyone for joining us during your lunch hour. Again, I am always grateful when anyone takes time to learn a little bit more about the Central Library, and in this case, we're going to learn a little bit more about a very prominent and important figure in the history of Puerto Rican baseball. It is my privilege to share the space with Raul Ramos, who I say I can call a friend. We've had many phone conversations over the years. And when I was doing the scheduling and the programming for this set of library lunch hours, I wanted to focus on researchers that have used resources available at Centro. And one of the first people I thought of was Raul. And we are lucky enough to have Raul's presence here today, right before the beginning of the baseball season. Thankfully, we're having a baseball season. This is his book. We have here one of the many books in the Centro Library about baseball. So thank you so much, Raul. And I want to say, tell us a little bit about your path as a writer and what led you to write a book about this illustrious individual.
Well, Aníbal, first of all, thank you so much for the invitation on this prestigious space. And thank you to all the people that are connected. You could be having lunch, listening to music, doing anything but being here. But thank you so much for being part of this baseball discussion. The best news is, like, in 2 days, baseball season is going to start, if rain permits in the Bronx. If not, we'll have to wait later on Friday. But anyway, so play ball. So I had the pleasure of playing Little League, and I was instructed by a couple of Negro League players, Juan Gilbe, fellow Gilbe, in what used to be the Francisco Pancho Coímbre Academy, baseball school in Ponce, the year after Pancho had passed away. And listening to their stories about Pancho, seeing how their eyes will glow like stars when they talk about Pancho, it helped me immerse and create some interest in the old baseball. Something that people doesn't know is, like, so these players, they play for Team Ponce, and Team Ponce defeated the Yankees in 1947.
Yep.
When the Yankees went to PR to Puerto Rico, and they also went to Venezuela. So Ponce was the first team that from the Caribbean that defeated the Yankees. So that's unbelievable, something that not many people know about it. And these players, they were so proud of it. and listening to their stories create interest in myself to learn more about not only baseball, but also Negro leagues and Caribbean baseball. That path took me to becoming a sports photojournalist. And later on, I decided to write a book about the life of Pancho Coímbre, who is considered one of the best baseball players, not only in Puerto Rico, but also in the Caribbean, in Latin America. He played in the Negro leagues. He's considered a Latin American legend, an all-star. And there wasn't that many information about him. It was also always the same information. And that's why I decided to do some research and write the book.
Amazing. And you know, for some people who want to know just what an unbelievable player he was, if you look at some of his statistics, it doesn't make sense. It almost doesn't make sense. So he did not strike out over a period of 3 seasons. So he played 3 seasons of baseball, over 550 at bats, and he did not strike out. Officially. And from the 1939 to 1940 season through the 1941 to 42 seasons, and in 3 other seasons, he struck out only once per year, which is like mind-boggling. Over the course of his career in La Liga Puertorriqueña, he struck out only 20 times in over 1,900 at-bats. So, I mean, these are ridiculous. Like, this is not even Ted Williams, like, had that level of control. So it merits inclusion in like the talk of like one of the greatest hitters of all time, and also a stand-up individual with regards to his dedication to the game and to being an ambassador for that game. So just, you know, learning about him, it's sort of like he's your favorite player's favorite player, right? People talk about him in hushed tones about, you know, his accomplishments. Take me through your research process for working on a book about such an illustrious figure, and where Centro figured into that research.
Well, first of all, so I gather a couple of books, biographies that have been written through the years about Pancho, right? Anything I could find about him. I created a timeline of his career, right? Putting things together on where I could find information about him. He played the majority of his career in the winter in Puerto Rico. And Centro is the largest archive collection of Puerto Rican books, information outside of Puerto Rico. And doing my research, I found you guys. my other option was going to Puerto Rico, right? Sure. So, but it's less expensive to pay the toll on the George Washington than getting multiple flights to PR. So anyway, so I think I called you, and we made a connection. And yeah, you can come these days. I'll be here. And I want to thank you and thank you the staff that was there at the time, and you guys were acknowledged on the book because of all the help that you guys provide. So when you do research and you have to go into microfilm, you have to read a lot. And reading, it makes you find other stories, interesting things, interesting facts about where you are researching. Something as minimal as like what movies were playing during that time, because you could see the movie theater ads, but then keep reading and make copies of the material that you are being able to read and putting that together. So so you guys were instrumental into this book, and I want to thank you for that. I want to thank you publicly. A lot of people doesn't know that you guys exist. And it's very important for the Puerto Rican community, Latin community, Hispanic community, outside Puerto Rico, outside their countries, that to know that you guys have a vast collection of newspapers, magazines, different materials that are there for researchers to use. And so that's very important. So anyway, so I created a timeline. I did a very similar research, but looking into Negro newspapers, Negro community newspapers, right? The Black community. So I did it for the Puerto Rican. I did it for the Negro community at the time, which is newspapers that doesn't exist anymore, but they are there for the research. And not far from you guys is the Schomburg Institute, which is also Puerto Rican, who had the vision of saving all this history, because at the time people didn't understand. They had the unfortunately misconception that because you were Black, you were dumb, and that's not the case. And as all of us know, our Puerto Rican heritage is a mix of the Spaniard or the European, the Black that came from Africa, and the native, right, the Taino. And so we have a strong African root. So Schomburg, that a lot of people doesn't know that he's Puerto Rican. He had a wonderful collection. He preserved a wonderful collection that is not far from you guys. So if you want to write a book, do it. Research it. Try to find information that is not anywhere else. Meaning you have to do interviews. You have to read a lot. Interviews were a big part of this book. Unfortunately, Pancho passed in '89, so over 30 years. Not that many people still alive that saw him play, but I was able to find a few of them. And the majority of the people that are still alive are people that knew him after he retired. But still, he was like we say in Puerto Rico, un personaje, a character.
Yeah.
Where he could tell stories. He knew he was very good. He knew that he was a legend, and he portrayed being a legend for others. So, and I'm very proud that I was able to write this book. Pancho is one of those heroes that people didn't know a lot about them, because he has been forgotten in time. And now I'm working. So the book is in Spanish. I'm working on the English translation, because something that, and this is just for all of us that were here in Puerto Rico, there's the issue that sometimes we write for ourselves and we don't write for the world to know. And unfortunately, for the world to know, that it needs to be in English, right? So, but the book is first in Spanish. I'm working on the English version. So now a lot of the Negro League baseball historians that they don't know, they don't have the information with, they will be able to read it and research it.
It's phenomenal. I mean, and a lot of people don't know that you know him and Roberto Clemente, they had interactions together, right? And would you share a little bit about what that relationship was like, and what Roberto thought about Pancho?
Well, so Pancho was like a father figure for Roberto. There's a misconception that said that Pancho was Clemente's favorite player, which that's not true. But the more like Clemente learned about Pancho, he admired Pancho's approach to the game.
Sure.
And one of the things is like in one of my interviews, Bombo Rivera, who he played MLB baseball for Minnesota, he's from Ponce. He talked to Pancho many times, and Bombo used to ask Pancho, I don't understand how you be able to hit 400. and Pancho said, well, for you, in order to hit 400, you need to want to hit 500.
Right. Amazing.
And then you need to want to hit a lot more to hit a bit less, right?
Sure.
And Clemente shared that same knowledge to Ken Singleton, who used to call the games for the Yankees. And Ken Singleton told a dear friend of mine, Danny Torres, who is also a writer, that Clemente used to say that in order to be able to hit high 300s, you want to hit at least 400.
Sure.
So it's the same way of thinking. And Clemente, all the time that used to go to Ponce, the ball players at that time, they will get together and be friends and talk about baseball live and so on. Funny story that Coímbre, his batting stance, he used to have a very high leg kick.
Sure.
Maybe let's compare to whoever remembers Ruben Sierra or Juan Gonzalez with a high leg kick, right?
Yeah.
But Coímbre used to be maybe a bit higher.
Wow.
And so Clemente, in one of these gatherings, he goes, well, if you had made it to the majors, to MLB, they will have corrected your high leg kick in the game. And Coímbre, he got offended, saying, I don't need to get corrected anything. So but they admire each other. When Clemente passed, Coímbre was very sad. Coímbre wanted to be part of Clemente's Ciudad Deportiva dream, right? So unfortunately it didn't happen. So yeah.
Amazing. And just being able to, thank you for laying out the trajectory of your research. You did a survey of what was out there, right? So that's like that initial research stage, and you put it out on a timeline, and then you find out where the gaps are, right? Where the gaps of knowledge are, and then you try to look for those organizations and institutions that might be able to fill in those gaps, right? So yes. Places like Centro, places like the Schomburg Center, places I'm sure like Cooperstown. I'm sure there are other places in Puerto Rico as well. And I think with a lot of these figures like Pancho Coímbre, there's a lot of like legendary talk about them, of like tall tales, apocryphal anecdotes about what they've done, who they were with, and what they have accomplished. And so you took that step to sort of demystify it a little bit and see who was Pancho Coímbre the person. And you went to the black and white, you went to the box scores, and you went to the articles, and you interviewed people that knew him and spoke to him firsthand. So that for me, it really crystallized who he was as a player, and made me want to learn so much more about him. And because if you ask anyone in my generation, and even if they're baseball fans, there's very little chance that they'll know who this individual was. Someone who Satchel Paige once said could not be pitched to. Pancho Coímbre could not be pitched to. He said, no one gave me more trouble than anyone I ever faced, including Josh Gibson and Ted Williams. So we're talking like a world-class hitter. And I remember reading, he would say that when you hit, you have to see the ball with both eyes. So yes. he was really in there. He was fearless. He must have been fearless to face these pitchers and be able to put up like 400 level batting average. Really is phenomenal. But moving along, you as someone who was a baseball writer for the Baseball Writers Association of America, who has their own blog, who you have a successful podcast, you write, and you're a photojournalist. What recommendations would you have for aspiring writers with regards to conducting baseball research? Like what ground is there left to cover?
Oh, there's plenty. There's so many stories that they need to be told, that they need to be shared. And for example, in Puerto Rico, unfortunately, for better or for worse, everybody wants to write about Clemente.
Right.
You know what? Great. But let's do Clemente in a different aspect, right? And there's so many players forgotten in time, like Coímbre, that it's not fair for them. Another great player that is forgotten in time is Perucho Cepeda, Orlando Cepeda's dad.
Yeah.
And he used to be called the Bull because of how strong he was. And there's a lot of stories about Perucho. The same thing with Luis Canena Marquez, who played in the Negro Leagues. He played MLB with the Pirates, the Boston Braves. and the Cubs. But he was also a great player. Just to mention a few, even Luis Arroyo, who pitched for the Yankees in '61. He used to be called Whitey Ford's savior, right? He will come for relief. But there's so many stories that you can find, or so many subjects that you can find and read about. But the thing is, like, you need to do your research. You need to try to find what's available out there. And a lot of these players, they have already passed. So you need to identify who play with them, who are their family members, and then with interviews with newspapers of the era, just create a picture about who he was. Like for this research that I did for the Pancho book, right? So he played all over Latin America. He played in Dominican Republic during the Trujillo era. He played in Venezuela, and when he was playing in Venezuela, he had to leave the country because his wife was ill. And when he was going to come in, there was a law in the books that was never used, that Black citizens of other countries were not allowed to come in. So he used to play for a team, and then the politician that brought that law, he was a fan of the other team that the Magallanes was playing. So they did something to not allow Coímbre to go into Venezuela.
Oh my gosh.
So that team will not have him as a player. He played in Mexico. He played in Canada. Of course, he played in the Negro Leagues. Unfortunately, he only played 4 seasons for the Negro Leagues. Yeah. If he had played 7 seasons or more, he would have been in the Hall of Fame, or he would have been considered to be in the Hall of Fame. But he was very smart. He was so smart that in the 1930s, when he played in Dominican Republic, someone asked him, like, the umpires that they had over there, they were not that great, so they asked him to recommend a few umpires. And, well, I know a couple of them from Puerto Rico, but there was a lot that there cannot be relationships, friendship between umpires and baseball players. So the umpires they go to DR, Dominican Republic, and someone see Pancho and talking to the umpires outside the game, and someone comes and like, oh, you know each other, I'm going to report you. And Pancho, let's remember, this is Trujillo's era, and one of the Trujillo's nicknames was El Jefe. So Coímbre goes, oh my God, please stop talking bad about El Jefe. and then the guy goes, oh my God. So he just left running, because in the dictatorship, sure, talking bad about it, something's going to happen to you. So he was very smart, very quick, and he was as quick with his mind, also with the bat.
Yeah.
Where he will use the bat as a sword. That's how bad he was. That's how good he was. He will study the pitchers before a game. He will sit down just to watch what they used to throw. At that time, they used to what, a curveball, fastball, curveball, maybe some type of slider, maybe. But he will sometimes leave the fastball just to hit the curveball. That's how good a hitter he was. So
amazing. I mean, the guy, it's, his record stands for itself. His ability with the bat is legendary status. So we have one question. And I encourage anyone who has any questions for Raul. This is an important time, and Raul's an important individual. So we have a few questions, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to go reading them, and Raul, feel free to jump in. The first one's from Manny Carvalho. He says, congratulations, Raul, not only for being a writer, but a great friend and colleague, a benchmark for baseball in the whole world. Can you talk about Pancho Coímbre and his stay in Venezuela, specifically with Magallanes before the LVBP? There are some images, but very little information about it.
So one of the stories that's the one I relate, that he left and they didn't allow him to go back because he was black. And he used to be Coímbre before becoming a great hitter. He was a pitcher, and he went to Venezuela to pitch. He had on his first year he had 4 victories. He had a record 4-0, but he was revered in Latin America. So after, it seems like he injured somehow his arm, and he became a second baseman outfielder, and it seems that it was a good thing that he he was able to pitch that much because of how good of a hitter he became.
Great. To what extent, this is a question from SR in the chat, to what extent is the rich history of Pancho Coímbre recognized by Major League Baseball?
Well, now that the Negro Leaguers are recognized as major leaguers, right? Because let's remember that I think it was last year, MLB recognized Negro League Baseball from 1920 to 1947 as Major League Baseball players.
Yes.
So Pancho Coímbre, Millito Navarro, Juan Gilbe, Felo Gilbe, all those players now are considered Major League Baseball players.
Awesome. Yeah, that changes the historical record. People have to go back and retroactively add hits to people, add home runs, add games played, at bats.
And now the issue that comes up, that brings a lot of people, that there's a discussion, right? So Irán Bithorn used to be considered the first Puerto Rican to play in MLB when he came with the Cubs, right? But before him, there was Pancho, there was Millito. The first Puerto Rican player to play in the Negro Leagues was Gacho Torres, who he played only for 2 games, but he played. So now there's discussion of who is the first Puerto Rican to play at Major League Baseball.
Sure.
Well, Major League Baseball is composed of a group of leagues, right? In them is the leagues before the 1900s, MLB, and now the Negro Leagues. So you could say, well, Irán Bithorn is the first player to play in the National League. You could say that. You could say that that he was the first player to play in MLB baseball. But when you consider the majors as a whole, then in my opinion, it's Gacho Torres. There's some people say no, you cannot put them together because you cannot allow MLB to take advantage of the rich history of the Negro Leagues. But I'm opposed of that. I'm opposed because, like, if you want to integrate them, and it's true, you have to keep, I guess, and like Negro Leagues are as a league, and Major League is another league. But if you are recognizing them, you want them to have the whole package, right? So there's still a lot of discussion about that.
Got it. We have one here from Daniel. Are signed copies of your book available for purchase? So please feel free to drop a link in the chat, Raul, later to share where people can get copies of your book. And you had mentioned that an English version is in the works.
Yes. So right now it's only in Spanish. So if your Spanish is not that great, get it in Spanish and you can practice. But if not, hopefully before the end of the year, the English version is going to be available.
And there's lots of great images, and it's not, I mean, it's a great read, but also there are lots of wonderful historical and archival images in the book as well, that you probably would not, that, Raul did all the work for you. You don't have to come to Centro Archives to get the images. Our friend Basilio Serrano has a comment. He says, great topic, and that in the 1960s, sandlot baseball was king in New York Puerto Rican communities. Many baseball leagues existed, and one of the most prestigious leagues was La Liga Pancho Coímbre de Nueva York. So there we go.
Which still is, they still play, it still exists.
Right. So his legacy lives on among the Puerto Rican communities. And then another dear colleague, Milagros Denis Rosario. Thank you for sharing your book, Raul. She had joined the discussion late. We did cover instances of racism that Pancho faced. She mentions the examples of when he went to Venezuela and the African American performers were impacted by anti-Black laws. So yeah, that was covered. How they did everything in their power to try to keep him from performing and from playing in Venezuela. So are there any other instances of racism that come to your mind now?
So when they used to have spring training, so they used to play in the South, but Pancho used to play in Puerto Rico during the winter.
Sure.
So the information that I got, but I wasn't able to extend it to confirm all the details, is that because they didn't like the way he was treated, he will come up ready to play till the end, because he was playing baseball in Puerto Rico till pretty much March.
Mhm.
So they needed time to go to have a good spring training. So he will be almost ready to play, just not to go to the South. So
Got it. Always ready. Yeah, con bate en la mano.
yeah.
Amy Allen asked, did you find many resources that gave you a sense of Coímbre's world in Coamo/Ponce when he was a little boy? If the neighborhood kids were playing baseball, etc., maybe up to about 1919 or so. What were those resources and where did you find them? Just curious, especially about his time period in Puerto Rico. Thank you so much. I'm really enjoying this. This is from Amy Allen.
So so a tool that I used was ancestry.com.
Sure.
And they have the census information.
Mm-hmm.
And so you go into census and you can find valuable information that you can, at a later time, you can confirm or ask about it. For example, in one of the information, I found out that, so Pancho had two sons, Rafael and Paco. Both of them already passed, unfortunately. But in the census, I uncovered that there was another sibling. But like when I spoke to Paco's widow, which probably is watching the saludos, they didn't know about it. So it was like before, like child was born, they would get sick and they would pass, right? So that was one of the instances. I've also found that the cause of Pancho's dad death. So people thought that, oh, he left. No, he died. So that was the thing. And something like, yes, he was born in Coamo, but Pancho's mother was born in Ponce. I'm sorry, Pancho's dad was born in Ponce, in el barrio San Antón. So el barrio San Antón was, or it still exists, but was the biggest Black establishment barrio in the South. A lot of rich history has come from there. Artists, painters, baseball players. So I guess a lot of slaves came into that location, and it's unbelievable. Like so, people always say, well, Pancho is from Coamo, was born in Coamo, but his roots, they're from Ponce.
All right, I think that's going to conclude the Q&A portion. I have a quick question for you, Raul. It's not a quick question, but I'd like to hear quickly from you your insights as a someone who covers baseball and contemporary as your career, and then give you a chance to plug your where you write and where people can find you. Can you give us your take on the current state of Puerto Rican players and players of Puerto Rican descent in MLB right now?
Wow, we don't have enough time to talk about that.
I know,
but it's going to be a interesting season. Everybody wants to have a good season because the WBC is going to be next year.
Yes,
and you could say that probably all the 8 position players, they are pretty already set for the positions. For example, Carlos Correa said that he has no problem playing third base, that he will allow Francisco Lindor, who played for the Mets, to play shortstop, and Javier Baez to play second base.
wow.
But
what
so,
an impact.
Right? Yeah, it's a great infield, right? Almost. Yeah. Anyway, so it's going to be interesting. They are going to be deciding who the GM for the team, and the GM is the one that picks the manager. Right now, for the running for manager, it could be probably Juan Gonzalez. It could be probably Yadier Molina. But that needs to be decided. So it's going to be an interesting season to see if Carlos Correa, what type of season he's able to have in Minnesota. Francisco Lindor, he's in his first year of his big contract, and he's looking very good. I think he left a lot of the baggage that he had of pressure when he first came with the Mets.
Yeah.
And Javier Baez, he's going to try to have a great season, a great 2 seasons, because he has an opt-out after a year or 2. So if he's able to put solid numbers, maybe he will opt out and try for free agency again in 2 years to look for another big contract.
And are there any young players, any not superstar names that we should keep our eye out for?
Yes, there's a couple of them, but I can think of MJ Melendez, who was the best player in the minor leagues.
Yeah.
He's with Kansas City. He's a great promise. And there's another kid called Velasquez. Is his last name with the Cubs. Yeah. He's very strong and very good. So you know what? Puerto Rico is a small island, but it has a lot of talent. And for the size, the talent that it produces is unbelievable.
Absolutely. One of the things that always strikes me whenever I always look up, active Puerto Rican baseball players, and something that always cracks me up is 27% of active Major League Baseball players from Puerto Rico are catchers. So just real quick, why so many Puerto Rican catchers?
Maybe it's something in the water, right? Like it's something that there's no real explanation.
Sure.
But without counting, like Hector Valle debuted with the Dodgers, and without counting the Negro Leagues, right? So Eliseo Rodriguez, he became very famous when he caught a no-hitter by Nolan Ryan in the 70s. And then you can think of Benito Santiago when he came.
Yeah.
I think it's about part of the hunger, right?
Sure.
Benito Santialomar Jr., Ivan Rodriguez, who in my eyes is the best catcher in MLB history right now.
Yeah.
He hit over 200, over 2,800 hits as a catcher in your knees. That will translate over 3,000 in a different position, right? And there's no catcher in MLB history that has hit more than 3,000 hits. And now Yadier Molina, who is in line to hopefully and probably make it to the Hall of Fame. So yeah.
Awesome. I mean, I'm just active. We have Yadier Molina, Christian Vasquez, Roberto Perez, Machete Maldonado, Caratini, Nido, Michael Perez, René Rivera. Those are just now. And then, we, like you mentioned, some, Ivan Rodriguez, Javi Lopez, Benito Santiago, Sandy Alomar Jr., Jorge Posada, Benji Molina. It's like there's, and now MJ Melendez is a catcher as well.
You know what? I want to compare it to before, in the 1980s, there were a lot of Dominican kids that wanted to be shortstops because they wanted to follow the career of Tony Fernandez, Alfredo Griffin, and so on, right? Jose Offerman. So I guess now there's a lot of Puerto Rican kids that they want to follow the careers of the footsteps of Ivan Rodriguez, Molina, and so on, right? So, and you know what? It had worked for them.
All right. So Raul, we're wrapping up. How can people best follow you? Where are you on social media?
So if you want to read me in English about Negro League Baseball, you can go to Negro Leaguers Puerto Rico. You can Google it, and it's a website by my good friend Jorge Colón Delgado, who's also a writer and a historian. If you want to read in Spanish about baseball, you can follow me, or you can go to www.conlasbasesllenas.com with the bases loaded. And in social media, I am in Twitter at Ramos Rauli, and I'm also in Instagram, Raul Ramos Uno. You can find me there. And hey, I'm always love to chat about baseball. if you see me and you want to chat about baseball, please hit me up, and I'll be more than happy to do it.
All right, Raul. And one last question, real quick. Who's going to win the World Series?
Oh, you know what? I would love to see Yankees versus Mets.
All right, there you go. Bam. Thank you very much, Raul. This has been a super engaging conversation. If it came across as me being a little overly enthusiastic, it's because I love all things baseball, and Raul's a good friend of mine. So thank you, everyone, for indulging us and taking time out to share your lunch hour with us. Another wonderful library lunch hour, and we'll see you again in a few weeks. Thank you, everyone. Raul, have a great day, and thanks a lot. Have a good day, everyone. Bye.